Welcome to the SteinerBooks conversation on autism. My name is Christopher Bamford. It's my great pleasure to introduce Dr. Lakshmi Prasanna and Michael Kokinos. Lakshmi is a developmental pediatrician and neonatal specialist from Chennai in India, where over the past 20 years she has founded hospitals, schools and clinics for working with difficult and autistic children. Michael is an Australian physiotherapist, specializing in neurology and the relationship of movement and sensation, and has been working closely with Lakshmi for the past 11 years. Lakshmi and Michael are the authors of a new book called Autism, Meet Me Who I Am, which presents us with a radically new and all-encompassing practical and philosophical approach to the care and treatment of children suffering from the now widespread, yet little understood, human condition we call autism. And they have just presented a seminar on the topic. Lakshmi and Michael bring more than combined 30 years of experience to the task or vocation of working with autism. Their unique approach, grounded in the work and spiritual research of Rudolf Steiner, is deeply existential and phenomenological and based in personal and practical experience. It's a truly holistic approach, practiced at a school and reaching beyond the individual children in their care to include children's extended families, including grandparents and the local community. It is thus simultaneously therapeutic, educational, sensory, nutritional, psychospiritual and social, engaging multiple sensory and motor capacities from rhythm and music to massage and craniosacral work, as well as to the imaginative and spiritual content of the Waldorf curriculum. In other words, it's a whole new world that they ask us to enter. And so, Lakshmi and Michael, wonderful to have you with us. And to begin, in fact, before entering into particulars, I'd like to ask you first to say a little about how you came to be in this new world, this work, with this new philosophy of autism, which has so much to teach us, not only about autistic children, but about ourselves too. So, Lakshmi, would you go first, perhaps?
Yeah. Yeah, by qualification, I'm a developmental pediatrician.
Mm-hmm.
So most of my life was either saving a newborn baby premature, extremely preterm babies, and then of course following up for the high-risk developmental challenges. That's when I had my first encounter with autism. I was fascinated.
Yeah.
Fascinated this beingness of autism.
The beingness.
Beingness.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's how I experienced autism. There is something around it, just not as a diagnostic symptomatology. And with every child I met who was in the spectrum, I felt more and more fascinated, more drawn into it. And then the history, the last few years just went exploring more and more and more and more.
So it's a powerful reality of the autistic child that impressed you with its very beingness.
Yes, yes. And each child, each individual with autism is like an encounter with a new being.
Mm-hmm.
And in that meeting, that being, I also meet a part of me. That's
Mm-hmm.
very fascinating for me.
Yeah, for me, I studied and worked as a physiotherapist in Australia and specialising in neurology. But I didn't do work with autistic people very much at all until my mid-30s when I met Lakshmi and went to visit her school in South India. Generally, physiotherapists don't do so much work.
Right.
It's more speech and OT, occupational therapy. So when I went, I just sort of landed at this school with a whole lot of autistic kids, and I just tried to see what was in front of me. Honestly, I didn't know what I was doing. I was exploring, and I was perplexed, confounded by these children who had capacities to move, to do things, but somehow those capacities were so fluctuating. And my question is always, why is that? What's happening here? How can we have a moment where you see this function, this beautiful capacity, and then it's gone? So I just set about exploring, kind of researching, and I used the medium that I know, which is my hands, physiotherapy, touch, massage, craniosacral, and I just worked. It took a lot of time to understand what was happening. Yeah.
Now, if I'm not mistaken, you met at a leprosy clinic in Nepal,
Yeah.
where you were both volunteering. And so that speaks to me that you both have this possible question in you, what ails thee? And that you have this deep commitment to be in the place where there is need and to feel that need yourself. I wonder if you'd say something about that. Just that impulse, the healing impulse, we could say, the courage to heal.
I mean, in terms of the leprosy work, what was really unique about that project where we met, leprosy is not something you can heal physically.
No.
If someone has damaged fingers and, severe physical disability. But what the project was very interesting, because the question was, can we find out something of the biography, the soul journey? And we together, we sort of rugged up in beanies, and it's not as well heated in Nepal as it is here in the US. But we were travelling around Nepal, talking to, I think it was 100 people with leprosy, to try to understand something of the journey of the soul with this illness, and that's how we met.
But it was this healing impulse that took you there. So at the deepest level, it's this impulse to heal that.
And with leprosy,
you.
well, I think there was a lot that could happen for the people on the level of the soul, on the level of understanding their life.
Right.
Not so much on the physical level, some certainly, but that opened up this idea for me too, that, at what level is healing happening?
Right.
Body, soul, spirit, where?
Yeah. Their journeys were very powerful for us when we heard the stories. Like Michael described, almost more than 100 stories, and their whole journey, most of them had this illness when they were 13, 14, and we met some of them when they were in 80s. So entire life with this illness, but the way the stories came out they were very fascinating for us, and a lot to learn. And also will to understand. We both come from conventional mainstream medical training, to look at an illness not as a punishment, not as an illness, but as a meaningful journey was very powerful.
Now, this will to understand is very critical.
Yeah.
And in fact, from the book and from the conference we've just had, one thing that strikes me is how close you are, in a sense, to the children you work with. I mean, you're almost like you're teachers, but you're also friends. And though the children are extremely difficult, you always are striving to move beyond that to sort of this place of common being human together. And in fact, to this place where one recognizes that what Rudolf Steiner speaks of as the infinite and absolute value of every human being. And you are able, in this way, to respect their individuality, because each one is different, each one is unique. And you allow them this freedom to be who they are. Meet me who I am. Well, to meet him who he is, he has to be free to be who he is. And you manage, in spite of the apparent impossibility of it, to communicate. I'd like you to, both of you, to speak a little about that and the relation between the verbal and the non-verbal, and the way in which expression always takes place in between, because you don't speak at people, you speak in you are part of the expression that occurs in between. So that, and behind that is this further question of what kind of relationship is an autistic child, an autistic person looking for from us? And how do we develop the heart capacities to enter into this? For instance, you speak of striving to meet their invisible needs. So would you talk a little around those those thoughts?
Well, very practically, there I was in a room, as a therapist working with these kids. And the first question really, because when we're trained professionally, we'd like to think that we know what's happening. I had this experience, I have really no idea your perceptive world, the way that you see, what you're hearing, because the children were, showing that their senses were hypersensitive. Like a motorbike would go by and the child would run to the corner and cover his ears. Just seeing these things makes you ask, what is it like to be in your skin? What is your experience? And that's a fundamental question, I think, of a healer. To ask this question, what's happening for you? What ails thee? And I think with autism, we just don't know. Because the characteristic is this non-verbal. They're not coming and saying, doctor, my knee hurts just here on the left. Far from. So I would just sort of make myself available. And after a while they realised, the children, this guy does massage and things with his hands. And I found generally I did not want to impose my will on these kids. It didn't work. They withdrew from that.
Right.
And there is this myth that, autistic children don't like to be touched. Well, I found that not to be true, actually. Because I just found that they need a certain sensitivity in the way that they're approached. And when I approached these children with giving them a lot of freedom and a lot of curious interest in their world,
Right.
they would come into the room, still no eye contact, no words, take my hand, lie on the table, and then put my hand on the chest or the shoulder or sometimes into the eyeball, all these strange places I would not normally have touched. And they ended up, using my hands to therapy themselves. It's very interesting.
Right.
So again, that was my journey into this continuously learning. I really don't know what you need unless you show me,
Right.
unless I am sensitive to your direction. I found this was very, very important with these kids. Yeah. And that led to just allowing the children to lead the process of healing. Now that changes things. It turns them upside down. And I think then that leads to a sense of, okay, there's an understanding, there's a resonance in the space, and more communication. I see it like, a certain window opens for a moment, and then if one's sensitive, you can go, okay, can we just find a way to just open that a little bit more, and then a little bit more, and a little bit more. And then some of these children began to type, and that opened up a whole new world.
Right.
Because their actual communications were even more surprising, their actual experience. So this was the journey that we tell in the book,
Right.
how the children led us to developing a pathway. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if you want to add to that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like you said, it's a path which we took. But for me, in the clinical practice, we see, at least as a trained developmental pediatrician, I'm seeing what is not present, what is not yet developed, and asking how to help this child. But with the children with this spectrum, with the diagnosis of autism, what I observed is, yes, it is true that they can't do a lot of things. They cannot manage a lot of things which we all can comfortably manage in sensory environment. But I also started observing, they see what we don't see. They hear what they don't hear. And they remember what we don't remember normally. That's where my interest went. So what is it that they're seeing which I am not seeing? And the moment I saw what they saw, and the moment I heard what they heard, we met. That was for me the door which opened. And that also took me on a path where they see what I don't see in me also. So this, what I don't know about myself is what is opened. So what do they need, in my understanding, is the more comfortable I am with who I am and go for a meeting, the more they come to meet. That's what I do still. If I have to have a consultation in my consultation room, a child in the spectrum, that's the preparation I do. Am I comfortable with who I am now, where I am? Yeah. And if I'm finding that person difficult or I'm finding it uncomfortable, I ask myself, what is it that this person pointing out in me with which I am not comfortable? That's the clue I would like to give to everyone. And some of the children even wrote about it later, that we are interested in your development.
That's amazing.
Yeah, so this is very interesting for me, that phrase, meet me who I am. And in curative education, we follow this principle, meet the child where the child is. But for me to meet the child where the child is, I need to know where I am. It's like point A to point B. So I need to come to myself so that I can meet the other.
Gosh, that's so because what you're suggesting is that there's a certain reciprocity between you, the doctor, and the autistic child.
Yeah.
And that the child is a mystery to you, but the inner life of the child has access to you.
Yes.
And I can't remember the exact words, but Rudolf Steiner has this verse that he gave to nurses in the pain that you feel, that I avoid, I miss the Christ, or so on and so forth. And so in a sense they're teaching you that I'm here and you must feel what I'm feeling because I'm already feeling what you're feeling.
Yeah. Yeah.
Something like that, no?
Yeah, we did this wonderful exercise with all the people in South India, all the staff 1 year. Where is autism in me? Each one has to write.
Oh, yes.
It was one of the powerful experiences for all of us.
Right, it's a very powerful experience because we actually all have autistic parts.
Yeah.
And to get in touch with those is a form of self-knowledge that gives us knowledge of something else.
Yeah. And then I can ask, how do I manage it, even though I have that point in me? And what exactly is helping me to manage it without expressing it is what I lend to the child or to the person in front of me. That's following Carl Koenig's.
I mean, in that sense, you could say somehow they're pointing us to the future.
Yeah.
And then when you were talking, Michael, about how they put your hand to the eye, and so brings me to this question about from what you write and speak, at the whole core of the autistic being as it is something like a reluctance or a refusal to embody, to incarnate. Autistic people, from the way you're talking, seem to experience difficulty or impediments in actually entering as I beings, psychically and spiritually into the body, which then remains something other, alien, threatening, painful. And I think this is why you discovered right away that digestive problems went with this, because the digestive problems is the body resisting whatever state the incarnation is in, or something like that. It has to do with the body anyway.
I mean,
is the digestion related to that?
Go on.
I don't even believe that there is a problem in their body.
Well, not in their body, but in their entering into the body.
Yeah, but I believe that they're showing us, if we are really sensitive human beings, really truly human beings, we need to come. This body is, for me, is like a home, which I chose, and my non-physical being is coming into this body. And at any stage, I can see that this is not the right way I would like to come. I have right to choose how I want to come. I feel they use their free choice uncompromised.
Oh.
Yeah, like for me, I'm compromised. Like if you offer something to me, well, I would like to eat that way, but then if that's not there, I will eat this. And they don't compromise. They don't compromise in their choice of the substance.
So it's a decision of the I.
Yeah. Yeah.
Huh.
Because we do see them fully, comfortably in the body and doing certain things, certain moments when we create a situation, a physical sensory environment, or what lives between human beings. When it is absolutely what they chose, they come and they manifest, I'll put it that way. I personally encountered many children who could really manifest when we both sit together and work in a harmonious way, like Ragini. And no one else could see this child in that state, like we have seen. It's very hard to describe it to the nurses or to the other therapists or to parents sometimes, but we do see them happening. So they are asking for something very specific, is what I personally.
But it seems sometimes that they have difficulty actually feeling their own bodies, their hands, their jaw.
Yeah.
It's as if there's some, in some way, they're then just disconnected.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's no resistance. It's the I makes the decision, but somehow there's a disconnect.
Yeah.
Yeah, Christopher, that's what I've found. I mean, I think when I watched children with autism moving, you see an intact body in terms of what it can do. It can move, not like cerebral palsy or some other disability, but this very unique sort of confusing way of using the physical vehicle. And then because we were curious, again, this question, what is your experience? We began to ask some of these boys who could type. And then, for example, there was a boy just sitting there chewing on a cushion, dribbling on the cushion and making some moaning sounds. When we asked him this simple question, why are you chewing this cushion? His answer is, and it's in the book, I can't feel my jaw and I feel lost. So chewing the cushion makes me feel good. This is a really, you have to take a breath and go, how would that feel to not be able to have the experience you said, embodiment of the body? And if that's the case, then where is this guy? What is he experiencing? You and I are sitting here feeling our bodies and sensing the world from a centre. But this boy's saying, I don't have that experience. I'm not feeling myself.
Right.
So for me, this is a profound indication. How can we help these people to embody, to feel their bodies? And that leads us down many, many pathways therapeutically. And even those, I've got a quote here. There's a boy who we met in Singapore, autistic, but verbal.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, we actually had a lot of time with him, and he wrote a book. I'll just read this, because it's very much what you've said. The autistic boy who had a body that was never right, a body that never tells him what it's feeling, a body that never listened to his will, like being stuck in an alien submarine in the depths of the ocean. So, living into that, how can one live? And then I just found these children, well, it's like they're sensing everything in the periphery and unable to integrate it all, and not able to sense themselves. So that's a lack of embodiment, as you said. And I entered that as a therapist, and this is the way we sort of look, because a lot of the therapies are cognitive, behavioural, you know, and a lot of behaviour comes out of the body experience. We know this. So I think what we're presenting is a kind of a reversal, you know, and really body-oriented approach, starting with nutrition, very clearly with nutrition, and then moving into sensory processing, but in a very humanised way, because I find the only thing that worked was this sensitivity you mentioned before of the human encounter. These kids are like searching for that. That's what I experienced. And when they're met in that sort of space, suddenly the behaviours change, the capacities increase. And then they might go back out into the world and show something else, but you have these windows.
Oh, it's very mysterious.
It is.
Because if you see a usual newborn or granddaughter, they are at home in their body right away.
Yeah.
And there's this wonderful, you know, you see the eye and the body and the baby, it's one.
Yeah.
And with autistic, it's not immediately apparent, right, that this child will manifest autistically, but over time they have this experience of not being at home in their bodies.
Yeah. And I wonder if that's, you know, kind of a primary experience that every human child needs, that's missing here. And then everything else is kind of layered on top of that.
And to take this further from the conference, from the book, you also get the sense that as they grow up, they begin to, they feel guilty about this in a certain sense. And even they feel they're to blame, that they feel shame even, but there's nothing, and they suffer it tremendously. And so there's a kind of inner knowledge of their own condition that somehow makes them feel guilty about it, or shame. How do you think, what is that?
There are occasions where children misbehaved to the extent, like we talked, this child wanted to do a music lesson, but this big boy had this habit of spitting on people's face quite badly, not just simple spitting. And we talked about it, and we said, this music teacher who's coming is an old gentleman, we need to be really careful, we don't spit. So we talked about it, and we sat for the lesson, but then of course, unfortunately, the spitting happened, and the music teacher got up and left. And that really disturbed me, because we talked about it, and he gave me his word that he's not going to spit, he's going to try. And then he could sense that I was upset. And he could not speak, and he could not say sorry.
Right.
But everything that he could do with that big body, he did to show to me how sorry
He was.
That was, I think, the most profound apology I ever received.
Amazing.
If a human being can feel sorry and can say sorry, that was it. But he could not say words. And then he rocked and he was restless, and then walked around, put his hand on my shoulder, he shook me up, and then he wanted me to look in his eyes, and then...
This is so interesting, because this
They could
strikes
feel
me now, and it's not a word that is mentioned in the book or we've talked about, that they have, that autism has one of its facets is an extremely sensitive and highly developed conscience.
Yes.
Yeah.
And conscience, for Rudolf Steiner, is really the organ of the future.
Yeah.
Which, it's developed through what Parzival, the Grail, what ails thee,
Yeah.
and that they have. Have you thought about this question of conscience?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
With
Yeah.
In
I-
some,
Yeah. Go.
We have.
teachers of conscience.
I'll say that very.
Yeah.
In some way, the child with autism is in a state that someone who's spiritually oriented might seek by going to a retreat where they sit meditating, to have a consciousness and not be bothered by the physical body. It's interesting
Yeah.
that we're seeking to sort of expand consciousness and be less oriented to the body. Well, these kids are already in that state.
Right.
So in that sense, I'm just picking up what your question
Yeah.
is. It's the right thing in the wrong place. So they're hyper-conscious. They're sensing the world. They're sensing the relationships. They're hearing sounds that we can't even pick up. But they're not able to feel if they're hungry or thirsty, or if they're in pain. Even all this sort of head banging and rocking and stimming, a lot of that I understand as simply a way to feel the body. If you stim and shake your body and rock, it's stimulating the body experience. So that's another indication. It's the right thing in the wrong place. I don't know. You were going to say something.
Yeah, but we started when we understood that they have this highly developed inner morality, I call it actually. Yeah, even though they don't look, their actions don't look like that. Their inner life is full of that. We started addressing it. I could talk to them. We could have long discussions about it, and they could hear it. But also to watch their pain. They want to do something, but they can't tell their body to do it. Which is something which all of us as human beings go through.
Right.
It's in an exaggerated way in autism. Yeah. I want to go for a morning walk, but what I want to become and what I can become, there's a gap. For me, it is really true to be human and to be honest and not to hide it. And that's how I see them. And an enormous amount of courage and love to hold that consciousness and still come into the body, to stay in the body and to try and to struggle, to work hard. And if we give them time, if we give them hope and trust and opportunities, they can hold this consciousness and come into their bodies.
Right.
That's a question of future, but I do feel that they can do it.
No, I was thinking Rudolf Steiner speaks of conscience as that which distinguishes reality from appearance, truth from falsity, right from wrong.
Yeah.
And so that they suffer because of our world.
Exactly.
In which
Yeah.
reality we don't have that faculty for just being knowing what's real, and this is appearance, and this is true, and this is fiction, and this is right, and this is not. And so they live in this mixed world, and this causes them great suffering.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, you know, so are they suffering for themselves, or who are they suffering for?
Yeah, good question. Well, I do feel they suffer, but if we share their suffering and we both together enter a land where, for me, it's knowing what is love,
Mm-hmm.
and becoming wiser about love is what I understand. Because there was a child who pulled my glasses and then crushed them, literally crushed.
Right.
Both glasses flew and the whole metal frame became actually just a distorted, crooked metal piece
Oh.
in a second. And then I can't see much without glasses.
Mhm.
And then I went there to have meal with him. And throughout the meal, the compassion he showed to me and the way he helped me to have my meal without glasses, everything, before I could ask if I needed something from the table, he could actually tune into my needs and my thoughts. He really took care of me.
So he was really apologizing too for.
And also he showed me, if I love you, you don't have to say anything to me. I know exactly how to care for your needs. The next 30 minutes, I really experienced how to be loved, how to be cared for.
That's wonderful. And so, and then, as you learn, as he teaches you this, you can carry this back. And how would you describe that love?
Like if I'm sitting at the table and if I need something, I can't see the whole table. Whatever he served me was exactly what I needed if I would have seen. So he was seeing for me,
Right.
total selflessness.
You're right. That's it. It's always, it's selfless and always from the other.
Yeah, from that.
From the other, for the sake of.
Totally. That's for me love. Yeah. If I needed a glass of water, before I could realize that I can ask for a glass of water, I'm thirsty, that water was there in the glass.
So interesting.
Yeah.
So that's love as the highest form of service.
Yeah. Yeah. I learned that from that boy.
And this wisdom, is it, do they all have some inkling of it? All the children at the school, do you think, some inkling of it? Or is this boy,
Yeah.
is this his special?
Most of them are with love, in my experience. Some work with freedom, the concept of human freedom, and the boundary. They work with that. Some are constantly challenging freedom and boundary. And some are working with truth, which is very interesting for me. Anyone speaks anything which is not true in the room, these children become totally,
Yeah, this is the same thing.
unmanageable. These are the 3 areas for me I learned to work with the staff constantly.
So there's a reciprocity of teaching, actually, in this whole journey that you're taking together.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what came out of the children who were able to speak or type. Dear teacher, I'm also here to teach you. This is what they're saying.
Yeah.
And they often, they're cheeky about it, like good teenagers are. And this is really, I'm always, we can think and theorize about autism, but I think one direction is to really ask these kids themselves. And we have to find ways to do that more, I think, because it leads us to a place we did not expect.
But the important thing, something that is close to my heart, is that to enter into those kinds of relationship, not only related to selfless, is to be unknowing, to be totally open, to be unknowing, so that you're an empty, you have no preconception, no prejudgment, no pre-thought. You're open, hands, heart wide open, no thoughts, and you just enter that space.
If we're honest, as medical educational, modern human beings. This is what autism's doing.
Right.
We don't know what causes it. We don't know what helps it. The evidence base is sort of frantically trying to be gathered, but we just don't know.
You just don't know.
I
Right?
wonder if we could enter that more consciously. That's what I did personally.
Right.
That's the journey, because I really and from that not knowingness, which is vulnerability,
Mm-hmm.
which is totally different to professionalism. To actually enter that with this child in front of you, each one different.
Right.
No one is the same. I mean, you can work with other so-called disabilities, Down syndrome and other, and you have a certain pattern. It's not like that with autism.
No.
Each sensory profile is completely unique. So even if I know something about autism, I'm still needing to come into this as well. I hadn't unknowingness or just phenomenal. Just watching what's there.
Right.
I think this is a key point.
I mean, what we know, what you know, like creating a diet protocols, as you've done, that is something you know.
Even there we enter unknown.
You enter an unknown, but at least it's something.
Totally, because
But-
I don't know. I only know what I'm offering to this person.
Yeah.
But I don't know what this person is going to do with that which is being
Oh,
offered.
obviously not.
Yeah.
But you know that this particular diet is would be soothing.
Yeah. Yeah. As better possibilities.
But on any other level, you really don't know.
No. How do I ever come to true knowledge if I don't enter unknown?
Right.
Yeah. If I'm just standing in my knowing, if I'm knowing more, it is not true knowledge. Only when I step out of all knowing, then I enter this unknown. Only then I can receive true knowledge.
Right. Now this takes on your part enormous patience and great humility.
Humility. That's
Because
what they taught me.
both the unknowingness, you have to be patient.
Yeah.
And you have to be humble, and you have to put up with everything that,
And not being understood by the
the
world.
resistance. That,
Yeah.
They nicely deprofessionalise us.
Hmm?
They nicely deprofessionalise all the professionals, the autistic. This is because it doesn't work. All the things that we've known, they might be temporarily helping behaviour management, but that's not healing. That's not helping. So they're asking us for something different. It's my real, I often feel the history of sort of disability care or management is that we diagnose and do something to fix or help the other. And as you said before, with autism, I think it's a paradigm shift. And you mentioned earlier, I know there are bunches of autistic kids who are online, who have blogs and support groups,
Right.
and they're referring to us here as NTs,
Right.
neurotypicals. So we're people who only can think and sense in a very linear, sort of frontal way, whereas they're experiencing this simultaneous perception. Those who can integrate the state,
Right.
the autistic state. Now, there's not that many who can do that, but those who can, they like their simultaneous perceptive state, and they're speaking about that as a state which is worthy. And I wonder if that is, as you said, a future possibility, if we can integrate it.
Well, if this, as neurotypicals,
Yeah.
our world is this objectified, represented, separate world, and
Yeah.
it was abundantly clear from what you did in the seminar and the book that autistic children, people have incredibly rich inner lives.
Yes.
But actually, their inner lives are also their outer lives. There's
Right.
they don't have that's their life, isn't it?
Yeah.
Whereas for us, we're cut off. We have a neurotypical life in the world,
And
then we might have an inner life that we think is something else. But in the autistic, it's one, isn't it? Is there any sense that that's the case?
I think, like you and I, neurotypicals, we sit here calmly and speak, and we're quite, calm and have behaviour.
Right.
But for the autistic child, I think their behaviour is an expression, a reflection of the outer environmental world. That's a kind of a thought to consider. When you see the behaviour of these children, it's kind of the end result of a process,
Right.
which includes what they've eaten, what's happening environmentally, colour, sound. They're hypersensitive. So if you're hypersensitive, what do? You reflect the environment with your behaviour. So this is one way that gives us I think a more human perspective on behaviour.
Right. I mean, there you're reacting in a way that immediately you've done it, you feel ashamed. Because it's just, you're no longer in the outer oneness. You've succumbed and just did a knee-jerk, stupid thing.
But have we not all done that?
Oh, we all do that. But I mean, it seems from the descriptions that autistic children, people experience the shame of having done that more deeply than we,
I think because they're
we all do that.
They're more innocent, Christopher. Like our boys are saying to us, sometimes I'm strong, sometimes I'm weak. Sometimes I can do what I want with my hands, sometimes I can't. My hands just move. And these are the boys who have been hitting, parents or teachers. And I believe there's no malice, there's no intention to do that. I've been hit, I've been scratched, we both have. But the experience is not one of this person wanted to hit me. I really experienced it as a loss of control of the body, because something environmentally has overtaken them. So can you see imagine if you did that, you would feel the consequence that you did it. But as you said, the guilt, the blame, and these boys speak about this. They speak about this. It's quite intense, actually.
Right. No. The speaking, and you mentioned we should probably talk a little bit about facilitated communication, because in the book there are these wonderful poems and these wonderful thoughts, and their depth of the richness of their lives. So that when you spoke of how when they're studying Greek myths, those things become completely alive to them. They have a sense of the previous incarnations and all sorts of things, which we know about through facilitated communication, because they can't speak it. They're not. So how do you? Which is a sort of which is still contested.
Yeah, it's absolutely. And to be clear, I'm not the one doing facilitated communication. I feel like I'm the witness and the reporter of this phenomenon. But I know these boys. We've worked with them since they were little, and we watched how they moved from non-verbal, and some of them can speak a few words occasionally, and then some of them have learned to type, sometimes independently, sometimes with just a hand on the back.
But they type themselves.
Yeah. And then sometimes with somebody actually just sort of holding the hand. Now, of course, someone might say, well, you're doing that, but I've seen
they're spelling the words.
They're moving the wrist and the fingers.
Yeah.
And we asked, we asked one boy, why can't you type yourself? Why do you need help? And his answer is very simple. I can't feel it's the same
That's
thing.
it, right.
I can't feel and control this hand unless you're nearby, and only specific people. So immediately we're scientifically under question, because they can't repeat that.
But the specific people are in a special relationship with this child.
In this case,
there are different
there are three
pairs of people.
There are three particular women who one who works in the computer room,
right,
and the other two are teachers, who they know and have known these children for a long time and worked with them. And this is what we're reporting. Now, of course, you could contest that, but I think, what else do we have in autism, especially non-verbal autism, as a methodology of research apart from the children themselves? Why would we not at least attempt to find a way to find out from them directly? And I think it's valid to do that. And I've seen these children, and I've seen them. They want to communicate. In fact, they're happy and calm when it's like they feel relief when they can communicate. I've seen that.
Yeah.
Another interesting thing is that each is, in a sense, alone in himself.
Yeah.
On the other hand, several of these communications, 2 or 3 people can be part of it, but they weren't necessarily there, so that they're alone in themselves, but they feel completely part of a collective, almost, consciousness at the school.
Yeah.
That was one of the surprises. These boys are it's 2 classes actually, and they like good teenage boys, they gang together, and they've called themselves Operation Love. And the other one is, there's another group in a different class, and they're Sacred Hearts.
Right.
And there's another name too. But they sometimes type and say, and sign off on the writing as 3 people.
Right.
And we've asked, what's that? Why are there 3 people? And it's like, well, they're also writing with me. Comes the answer. So, okay, they're in this sort of. I've had this experience too, where you watch them in the class, and they're not interrelating in the way that you would see teenage boys talking, pushing. One's here, the other one's playing with some cotton wool over there, this one's flicking something or other over here. But every now and then you see these glances, and you get a sense that they're actually in communication, but not in the conventional way, through the physical body.
Yeah.
If you can't sense your physical body, okay, if it's not working for you, how would you communicate? This is a question.
Right.
You have to find another method.
And what do you think is going to be the future for these children that you've seen growing, from birth, some of them?
Yeah.
And then they're going to will they leave the school at some point?
Yeah.
And then go back to living at the home?
Yes, some of them, we could see where they can go and deepen their skills. Like one of them plays music, and one is going to go and then work with catering. He's very good with serving food, and he loves it. So to really identify what gives them meaningful life, and they express their pain to leave their friends, but they also say, yes, we need to go now. It's time to go. The way they deal with this change also is very good to see. So some of them are leaving, and some go to the next vocational level, other centers. It's good to see.
I was thinking that this is special, on the one hand because of Waldorf and philosophy, on the other hand because Indian culture itself is inherently pervaded by spirituality and spiritual ideas are a part of this, the air you breathe.
Yeah.
So that gives you a sort of context where you're permitted to experience these children out of that context. And then the Waldorf brings this profoundly imaginative, which they get from their own myths also, but also the use of music and painting and rhythmic movements, so that
the whole curative education principles.
Hmm?
Curative education principles.
Right.
Yeah.
And
having said that, I also feel that the same kind of messages come from other parts of the world where we work with children.
Mhm.
Maybe not to this extent of following them for many years, or working with them consistently over many years, but there are some common ground.
But
some
the
common
essential
messages.
autistic phenomena remains the same, whether it's in California or Chennai
feel
or
that.
Hong Kong. Or
I think so.
Yeah, I feel that.
But as you say, it's coloured by the local culture.
right.
Yeah.
And as you say, in India, it is a spiritual consciousness,
Yeah.
especially South India. And a lot of the parents see it this way too. So that makes it different
Yeah.
compared to being in the West. Certainly these children speak about their spiritual mission very clearly to
Mhm.
us. You know, again, this heightened consciousness. Most of us don't speak about
I
that.
know, it's a very advanced consciousness at some level.
That's common everywhere. One
Yeah.
girl in Northern Territory, Australia, we were going to have tea with her at home, and by the time we went there was on the door a picture of me drawn in the color code which I was wearing.
Right.
In my entire life, that was the only time I was wearing that color code.
Mm.
Normally I don't wear those colors. She drew and colored,
She had
welcoming
she
me.
had seen you coming at a great distance.
Much before I
An
went.
Australian girl.
Australian
There you
girl.
go, right.
Yeah, and then she said, my mom got 2 songs out of me, and her mom was teaching her music, and there are many songs. Can you please tell her how to bring the next one out? That's for me everywhere seeing this consciousness.
In a way, what you're bringing also, besides all the details of these wonderful practices, is this how to be a true helper.
Yeah.
And this because if you're always there with this intuitive of what is needed, without and unknowingness that you don't beforehand know ever in any situation, that's the kind of love that that is healing in a certain way.
If you allow me to use the word differently, I don't even feel it's the word helper.
Yeah.
I would like to use there because I want to see that as sharing life and allow them to care for you and care for them, like caring for one another, sharing life.
Oh, I think that's excellent, because
in the land of
I
love.
now feel guilty for when we use the word helper because it's a subject-object word. You help another. But when you share,
sharing.
you're
The paradigm shift.
paradigm shift from
sharing
helping
life,
to sharing. That's
caring
wonderful.
for one
It's
another
two-way.
Right.
in a land of love
Mhm.
where there is no right doing, wrong doing, like Rumi.
Right.
There is no right wrong, and that's the land of love they're asking us to enter. That's my experience with them, to really live together
Mhm.
and to care for one another. To allow them to care for us is important. They're great carers.
Mhm.
They want to heal. They want to care for us. If we care for them and if you allow them to care for you, that's really for me. Yes.
And I think for me, similar but just slightly different perspective. For me, love is the will to understand the other.
Mhm.
Very simple. There's a lot of other things that could be love. I
Yeah,
think
but
that.
together again.
But to understand the other, the will to understand. So, you know, we think, I love you, or I love this person, but it's a constant question. You know, what is your experience? And do I stop at the point where I think I've got it? So I'm on this journey with these kids. What is your experience? It's the same thing I asked at the beginning on the first day, meeting this child.
Yeah.
Deprofessionalized, vulnerable, not knowing, unknowing. What is your experience? And that's what has led us into the book and to the children themselves. Because each time I learn a bit more about autism, I find myself and my perspective, my worldview, my neurotypical experience kind of either shattered or expanded, or both simultaneously. And that is interesting. That's been my experience. Who's helping whom? I don't know. Yeah.
Well, thank you. I think that's a good note to end on.